This is one of my favorite videos to make for Rise of Kingdoms. It is the best open field marches in the game. Whether you like archers, infantry, cavalry, or even leadership commanders, I will review the very best combos. And at the end, I will give you the top 5 open field pairs. These are not marches that you have to use all together in combination, but just the best individual marches in the game so that you can build toward them. But before I begin, allow me to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, Infinite Galaxy. Infinite Galaxy is like Rise of Kingdoms, but in space, where you collect flagships and warships, and they even just released a brand new game mode called Ace Strike, where you are controlling a fighter from a third-person view, and you're crushing other warships. I mean, this reminds me a lot of, like, you know, a mobile game version of Wing Commander, but this actually pulls from the stuff that you've accumulated in the game, which is really awesome. And if you want to join us in Infinite Galaxy, then use the link in the description, which will support the channel, and join us in Nebula 13. Nebula 13 is where this is all going down. I have been playing this game for almost a year now, and I'm still very much enjoying it. So join us in Nebula 13. What are you waiting for? As you know, in all my long-form videos, there are going to be timestamps in the description to jump to whatever part of the video you're most interested in. I'm going to start by sharing with you the commanders that don't quite make the cut. The pairs that, if I don't talk about them, people will ask in the comments, why didn't you mention Richard and Alex, or a few other combinations that are very common. Then I'm going to go into the actual honorable mentions, the pairs that are almost the very best, but not quite there. And we'll break that out by troop type, archers, infantry, cavalry, leadership. And then I'll get into the top 5 pairs in the game. And you may be wondering, Chisgule, what even qualifies you to make this video? If you haven't been following my channel where I cover Rise of Kingdoms for the last 3 years, I've got a couple things that would signal I may know what I'm talking about. One of them is that I've got over 8 billion kill points. I was chatting with my buddy Cortex the other day, and he was like, bro, I don't take advice from players who are low kill points. And it's like, okay, you know, anybody can theory craft, but there is something to be said for actually spending time getting your kills on the field. And in this last pass opening, for whatever it's worth, there was 4 days of fighting. I stopped fighting after 2 because it was clear that we had locked up the zone, and I was 9th in our kingdom for kill points. So, I mean, I do a lot of open field fighting. This matters to me a lot as a topic. I really want to be right when I make these recommendations because literally it impacts my own gameplay very, very significantly, and hopefully this will be helpful to you based off of my experience. Now, all of that aside, let's start with the combinations that are not on the list. These are good starter marches, but you ultimately will want to graduate out of them, or they will get outpaced. And those marches that early game players will be asking about include combinations like Richard and Alex, for example. A really great pair together in like KVK Season 2, but then fades very quickly and doesn't work in Season of Conquest. At least I don't think so. Alex and Esong, same story. You want to graduate to an infantry march and an archer march. And even Ramses and Esong, a great pair in the Season of Conquest. But remember, I said this is the very best pairs in the game. And in this day and age, I actually have a few recommendations, a few things that will be, I think, probably even, in fact, will be much stronger than that. And there are also some pairs I wanted to just mention at the start of this video. They're not even honorable mentions. And I am going to put these into a category I'm going to call overrated. And there's 2 archer pairs that I think are overrated. One of them is going to be Ramses and Tommy, and the other is going to be Artemisia with Tommy. You know, Tamaris is very, very strong for her debuff. Keep in mind that although she is making the target take extra skill damage, I find that these 2 marches that I just described, which I have used both of them extensively, are fairly weak compared to your other options. They're not doing area of effect damage, and often I'll get a report back, and I'm just like, okay. I mean, I get that they're enabling more damage to happen, but they're very squishy in the grand scheme of things and aren't contributing as much as I would like compared to all the other pairs I'm going to give you. So if you think, man, I don't know, I would say Artemisia with Tommy is still a good march. You know, I'm not going to say it's a bad march. I'm just saying it's a little bit overrated from where maybe people estimate it ought to be. Let's now talk about the archers. I mean, I'm already got archers up on the screen, right? These are sort of runner-up commanders here, honorable mentions. They almost make the cut, and they are very top-tier marches. The first is going to be Gilgamesh with Nebu. Gilgamesh is bringing a health debuff, and man, Nebu behind him just does huge AoE damage. The two of these commanders together are very strong, and I actually may move in this direction just to get a few other archer combos into my murder ball. That is maybe topic for a separate video, but Gilga Nebu is definitely a runner-up. One of the very best archer combos that didn't quite make the cut, but honestly almost could be considered one of the top marches in the game. And this next archer pair is really strong. In fact, I'm just going to pick the primary commander and give you a ton of secondary commanders you could use. It is a Cyrus primary with either Ramses secondary, Esong secondary, or even a Relic Mehmed secondary. Cyrus is designed to slay in the open field. All of his skills are good in the open field. He has several forms of instant proc damage and reactive damage and debuffs. He is doing a majority of the things I would want you to have for open field fighting, including, by the way, march speed. So I really like Cyrus in the open field, paired with either Ramses or Esong or Mehmed. These are great combos. I would not say as an individual march they are the best in the game, but you make any of those pairs and no one will look at you funny for having done so, except maybe the Mehmed I think people won't expect. But dude, he is good. He does a lot of damage, hits 5 targets, actually shockingly good. And the next commander that is strangely viable now in the open field is Esong and Mehmed. And you may think, Chisgule, you've been telling me for how long not to use Esong primary? But I'll tell you what, man. My buddy Cortex was running Esong primary, Mehmed secondary in the open field, and he did just fine. Now, why is it that all of a sudden an Esong primary is even a consideration? And that is because there are scarier targets now than an Esong primary in the open field, which is really, really weird, man. We've entered a day and age where Esong is not the biggest threat. It's probably XY or Nevsky that are going to get targeted first, above and beyond your Esong. So suddenly, Esong is somewhat safe to bring to the open field. I wouldn't go out of your way to make this combo. And again, I think there are better combos that I've even already mentioned for archers, but I would be remiss to not mention that Esong Mehmed actually works, and you will see Mehmed all over this list. In fact, let's talk about Nebu with Mehmed. Nebu does big area of effect damage, and so does Mehmed. And now Mehmed gives 20% health and extra skill damage. Actually, a very strong combo that you would not be embarrassed to bring to the open field. The amount of area effect damage you do here is actually nasty, man. And if you wanted to move your Esong away from like a Nebu Esong combo, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, then bringing in Mehmed would be super reasonable. He actually is very underrated if you have him relicked. I wouldn't go and put gold heads into Mehmed specifically to unlock it, but like, I don't know, man. It's certainly worth considering some amount of investment there. Nebu, Mehmed, actually really top tier, but not the best of the best. So remember, these are all honorable mentions. And now let's talk about our infantry honorable mentions. And there's a few commanders on here that, man, these pairs are good. The first pair I want to talk about is Pakal with Herald. And this is just a nasty combo for getting insanely positive trades when you're outnumbered. And the reason is that the way that damage reduction works stacks really, really, really well. So the amount of damage you take when you get swarmed using Pakal goes really, really low. So your counterattack damage is through the roof. I really don't think this is a combo that belongs in your murder ball because people will just ignore it and it will not do enough damage to protect your other marches, like the top 5 marches that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later on. And that's why it gets the honorable mention. It's a fine march. In fact, in certain situations, it's the best march you could possibly bring. But in most situations for an open field fight, it's not the march that I would look to bring. Similarly, I like Herald paired with Alex. Alex brings a ridiculous amount of utility, and Herald brings the damage. The only downside is that they're missing AoE damage, except when they're getting swarmed, and then Herald will do some reactive damage, and you'll trade pretty decently. It's a solid march, but not the absolute best of the best. And on the topic of really solid marches, but not in the top 5. Remember, top 5 is a very exclusive list, okay? I've got 2 Guan marches, Guan and Alex, and then Guan and CJ. Guan is arguably one of the very best open field commanders in the game, and thankfully, I will make the argument that, well, without spoiling too much of this later, that Leo is the best way to pair with Guan Yu. Not that CJ isn't good, not that Alex isn't good, but that comparatively, they're not as good. My estimation here. So I think Guan Yu with either Alex or CJ is great, but not the best of the best. And on the topic of Alex and CJ, smash them together. And that's a March that actually is pretty strong. I like that CJ has reactive damage. As I scroll down to find, here he is, him in my list here. He has a little bit of reactive damage, but he doesn't actually bring big utility. And in an open field brawl, one of my main credentials for making a commander really effective is that they do instant proc damage, area of effect damage, march speed, and maybe there's other couple factors, but maybe tankiness is pretty important here. He doesn't really bring a lot of tankiness, and he doesn't really bring a ton of area of effect damage, and he doesn't bring any utility. Maybe that's the most important thing. No big debuffs that make the enemy pop. They die faster. So that's the problem. I mean, I feel like you really have to have either area of effect damage or major utility. And lacking both of those things is why a commander like CJ doesn't make the cut for the top marches in the game. But now, the Cavalry. The Cavalry are here. The addition of Nevsky to the game so insane. All of a sudden, every Cav commander just about is viable, which, like, congratulations to players who like Cavalry. Almost all Cavalry commanders are now viable. I think Nevsky and Minamoto is a very solid March. Not the best of the best, but still really good, and you would not be ashamed to bring it to the field. Shockingly, by the way, one of my favorite marches of all time, Saladin and William, no longer makes the cut as one of the top marches in the game. That's not to say it's a bad march. Pump the brakes, everybody. Take it easy. I'm saying this is still a great march. One of the stronger marches, not top 5. Saladin William was in that spot. Similarly, I think Saladin XY is solid. The problem here, the limiting factor for this combo is actually now the Saladin. Saladin and these combos I'm mentioning are great for a lot of people to work on because you only need the first 3 skills on this commander to get 95% of the value you're going to get from him. I'm making that number up, but the reason is that the 4th skill is actually not related to open field fighting, and then the expertise skill barely improves the active skill, so you're just like really not missing all that much. But with the addition of Nevsky to the game, Nevsky and all of those pairs is just better than Saladin. Like, Nevsky is just straight up better across the board. So Saladin with XY secondary or William secondary, still great marches. Even Mehmed secondary, you wouldn't be ashamed to use these marches, but they're not the best in the game. And there are a ton of XY combos that I need to talk about that are not the best in the game, but are actually shockingly good. And that includes XY with Honda, XY with Mehmed, XY with William, and XY with Chandra. All of those combos with XY are nasty, the common factor here being XY. XY is really good. So good that you will struggle a little bit to use him in the open field because everybody focuses this march now. They know that his area of effect damage, his defense reduction, it's all a little bit out of control. And they also know that he has no defensive capabilities whatsoever. So that's why I prefer bringing marches that are, or at least bringing a secondary commander that is a little more tanky to support XY and make him more survivable. Also, I like bringing other marches that provide defensive stats, like Mulan, I'm going to talk about in a bit, like William in another march to give this march defense, which I'll talk about more in just a little bit. So if you are going to use that XY primary, try to move into as much defensive gear as you possibly can. The only piece of equipment here I have that is not in a defensive stat is actually the Cav Sword. And you could make an argument here that instead using this item over here, Heart of the Saint, might be better with a special talent. 17% defense versus 25% attack. I know it sounds weird, but given that you will be tanking with this march, I'm just saying, sticking with the defense item is not the worst idea in the world. And one other march I just need to mention, it's an honorable mention, is going to be Attila Takeda. I actually don't love this march for like a murder ball. in general. A lot of people still use it, and I don't blame them, man. It trades really well. It does trade really well. It's undeniable. I just want a little more area of effect damage and utility when I'm bringing a march to the open field. And although Attila can't be silenced, that's quite nice. Although he's got a lot of really nice sustain with the Takeda, the debuff here is reducing just the, I think it's the attack of the enemy. And that's nice, but I want debuffs that actually make the enemy disappear faster. I want defense reductions. I want health reductions. It doesn't really do any of that. I want things that increase the damage taken by the target, and he doesn't do area of effect damage. This brings us, by the way, to leadership commanders, and this is going to be probably shocking to you that I don't put these commanders in my top list, but remember, the top 5 marches are so good that they can stand alone. They need no other support. They don't need anything fancy to make them good. They just are good. They are objectively all on their own, need nothing, and are strong. And so the marches now that I'm going to talk about in leadership, they definitely would be top tier marches. They're honorable mentions here, but they are a part of a murder ball. And that's what makes them strong. So the first march is going to be Trajan with either Mulan or Ethelfled or Harold. The best of those being Trajan with Mulan. And I made a video dedicated to that topic, card up in the top, testing out exactly why that's the case and proving it. Trajan with Mulan gives a ridiculous amount of buffs, and the Mulan secondary especially. Remember, I was just saying they're going to focus a march like XY, the weakest thing they find on the field. Well, being able to bust out Mulan and give your XY 40% of defensive stats, oh, and some march speed too, by the way, is really good. I love this skill right over here. But also the underrated factor of Mulan is that when she uses an active skill, she also makes it so that the target can take 20% increased damage from all sources. Ooh, that actually is way underrated. It's very good. It's much better than people give it credit for. So that Trajan combination is going to be an honorable mention leadership march. And the next honorable mention leadership march, it's not the best of the best, although if I were making a murder ball, I'd like to bring it. It's the new best combination for Tommy, and that's actually Honda Tadakatsu with Tommy. Why is that so good? Tommy wants you to use your active skill more slowly, and Honda Tadakatsu does his active skill more slowly. This makes it so you get more poison stacks from Tommy onto the enemy, making it so they take more skill damage. And then Honda does just nasty, nasty, absolutely disgusting area of effect damage. In my perfect world, if I had Honda maxed, I probably would include him in my 5-march murder ball. But if I was bringing just 1 march to the open field, it would not be Honda with Tommy. Honda with Tommy is the sort of march that makes your already strong murder ball even more insane. But if you don't already have 4 other crazy marches, then I don't think that a Honda Tommy makes a lot of sense. So this is really like an icing on the cake march. It's something that I wouldn't say is one of the top 5. It doesn't really stand alone. It's all about being in a murder ball, just like Trajan and Mulan are really good, but it's all about being in a murder ball that has incredible synergy. And so this brings us now to our top 5. The 5 very best marches in the game. They stand alone. They need nothing, literally nothing else to be good. Starting with number 5 is going to be a Monitori primary with Artemisia secondary. You knew I was going to do this, right? You knew I was going to mention this march. It has a ton of area of effect damage, and the synergy of these two commanders where Artemisia boosts all damage dealt, but silences herself, but a Monitori makes it so that you are immune to silence. That combination is so good. Plus, it makes all those Guans that are in the open field silencing not do the thing they're trying to do to you, which is silence you. So the immunity to silence is very strong, plus reactive damage. When you get hit, you do damage back. In this case, reactive skill damage is really good. You take skill damage, you dish it back once every 10 seconds. It's instant proc damage, but reactive, which is nice. This is one of the strongest marches in the game, but I dislike how it performs when it gets swarmed. It actually is very vulnerable to getting swarmed. People, however, target it with lower priority than things like XY, which makes it viable and is also the reason it's only number 5 on this list and not any higher, is that I think it's good, but I think it would be the first march I would remove from this list of the best marches in the game. Now remember, these best marches in the game are not designed necessarily to be used all together. I'm just saying, what are the best 5 individual marches? And number 4 on the list, I have to obviously include Nevsky. I have to include Nevsky. And the secondary commander I would use with him is actually William. The combination of Nevsky-William, this is the new Saladin-William, everybody. Welcome to your new Saladin-William combo. It's the better Saladin-William. William is a team player march. I get it. And I know I just said I'm not trying to include, like, you know, enabler marches. But the thing is that Nevsky with William will do so much damage, it almost doesn't even matter that whether or not you have other marches nearby to, like, be getting the benefit of the buffs. He is just nasty. His damage is absolutely insane. And paired with William, I mean, both of them care about swarming a lot and get more effective on targets that are being swarmed. They are really perfect for each other. They're all skills that are designed for the open field, both of them together. It's got debuffs. It's got area of effect damage. It is one of my favorite marches to use. And even when it gets focused, man, it still does great because Nevsky actually has a bunch of defensive stats, which is so nice when you're getting focused down, which you will. You will take a lot of heat with this march. People know it's good. The number 3 march, however, is an oldie but goodie. I don't think it's been displaced, honestly. I think it still deserves this title, and it is Nebu with Isong. It's just, in my estimation, the best Isong pair there is. Both of them do skill damage to up to 5 targets, and the boosted skill damage by Isong, 50% boosted skill damage, is just nuts. These two are squishy. The only defensive capability you're getting is from Nebu, except I guess Relic Isong has a little bit of defense now. Is it like 10%? But the magic of this combo is that they do so much damage before they start to get focused and start to take negative trades that it offsets when they do finally get focused. And people will again pick XY over this combo as the thing they hit first, which means you've got some air cover to do absolutely ridiculous amounts of damage. And it's area of effect damage, which you know I love. And it's not even, the Isong doesn't even care where they are. They're behind you. It doesn't matter. And that's absolutely phenomenal. Strong combo. Number 3 on my list. But the number 2 on my list, dethroned from being the champion from the last time I made this list, is going to be Guan and Leo. Guan and Leo are god tier, man. This is the way. And I know that's a bold claim, but Guan does absolutely ridiculous amounts of damage. And he does a silence, and the silence is really the key. He is arguably one of the best open field commanders just because of this silence. And Leonidas gives him the tankiness. Leonidas is actually the reason that people think twice about focusing down a Guan. Because Leo brings so much tankiness, even just a 5-5-1-5 Leo, or an unmaxed Leo, just in general, is so good that I just think this is one of the best combos that you can muster in the game right now. And although it used to also be one of the best dueling combos in the game, 1v1 March, it's not anymore. It's still doing so much area of effect damage that I feel like almost every single time I bring my Guan Leo out to fight, this March trades massively positive, which is just ridiculous. It's one of my absolute favorite marches to use in the game, and it's not even close. The utility, the synergy between the two, they were meant to be paired together. Pair them together. Collect your victories with this march. It's so good. But it's only offset. It's only displaced by this number 1 march. This number 1 march, I think it's the best march in the game now. I could be wrong. I'm open to the idea that I might be wrong here, but I don't think I am. I think the new Overlord, the best march in the game, is XY paired with Nevsky. I think that's it, man. I really do. Why is this arguably, in my estimation, the best march in the game? It is because of the area of effect damage. He is doing ridiculous AoE damage, 1700 damage factor, 3 targets, and reducing the defense of the target. Remember I said you either need to have crazy utility, making the target very vulnerable, or you need to have area of effect damage. He has both, folks. He has both, and when you stay in combat for a prolonged period of time, his damage ramps up a lot. Also, his rage requirement is very low, which means you're going to apply this defense reduction and then, boom, smack everything that you're fighting with that defense reduction applied when all your other marches use their active skills. It's just too excellent. It's too excellent. And when you pair with Nevsky's secondary, all of a sudden, this very squishy march is getting a lot of perks. One of those perks is 20% health. Another one of those perks is 20% defense. Oh, and by the way, when you're surrounding something, that surrounded target will do 5% less damage to you. That's nice, okay? He's bringing to you a little bit of tankiness. Oh, did I mention that when you're getting attacked, you have a chance to gain 30% health? Did I mention that? He's bringing you the tankiness that XY has always needed. And I think that if you are running a murder ball, if you have other supportive marches nearby, like William giving 20% defense, like Mulan giving you 20% defense and health, you can put a lot of sort of sustain and staying power onto this XY Nevsky, which will absolutely be the thing that they focus. Absolutely no questions asked. They will gun for this march. So the thing you need to keep in mind, unlike Guan and Leo, which actually gets tougher, it gets better when it gets sort of low health and starts to die off. It starts to get shields and an attack boost. This is a march that you probably do at some point want to run away. And good news, Nevsky's got 20% march speed, and also XY has a bunch of march speed, so you can run away from the combat. You will want to maybe micromanage this particular march to flee when the going gets tough, which is a little bit of a bummer, and you offset a little bit of the fact that you're going to get potentially focused down with the fact that you will also be ramping up your cavalry damage over the course of the fight. So the longer you stay in combat, the more damage you're going to be doing, which is really, it's a very powerful march. It is possible that XY with Honda maybe deserves to be in this top 5 list as well. But I think compared to, I don't know, man, Nevsky secondary, can we really argue that Nevsky secondary is not the way? By the way, not only are you firing off the XY active skill before all your other marches do, but assuredly you will then also have Alexander Nevsky's defense reduction applied to the target, 45% if you're surrounding something, before all your other secondary commanders have started to use their active skills from your other marches. So the amount of debuffs you're putting on a target right before you blast it with all your other stuff, it's OP, man. I think this is the best march in the game, but I'm eager for your thoughts down below in the comments. I probably missed a march or two, but I think this is a pretty comprehensive review of some of the very best marches in Rise of Kingdoms across all the different troop types. And in my pinned comment, I'll go and update it in case there are any pairs that you bring up that I miss, and I'm like, oh yeah, I really should have included that in the honorable mentions. If you got value from this video, throw a like on here. It supports me, 100% free to you, and consider subscribing for daily Rise of Kingdoms videos designed to help you get value and smash your enemies. I'm definitely looking forward to more fighting in this KVK that I'm in. It's free for all, which is going to be absolutely insane. I mentioned I stopped fighting 2 days in to the 4 days of fighting that we had, and the zone we were just battling in, because we had it pretty much locked up at that point, which means I've got a ton of gold left, maybe a ton of gold left for more fighting to come in other zones. You're not going to want to miss it. And if you're looking for a dedicated guide for Nevsky, because really you need to be using Nevsky, he's so good, then check out the card up in the top where I review some of his skills and some of his best pairings. I am very happy I expertise this commander. He is top tier. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.